exercise a greater level of diversity are ultimately more successful. And when you bring women into the mix, women bring just a different perspective, a different viewpoint. Companies that have a higher percentage of women in leadership are ultimately more socially responsible and have greater customer experiences and more profitable. For every 10%, surveys conducted say that for every 10% of women in leadership, you gain an additional 3.5% to the bottom line, which is pretty incredible, right? Now think about that, and when you think about the number of women, I read through several sources of statistics. Of all of the leaders in the nation, only 35% are women, a little less than 35%. When you narrow the scope to the technology industry, that number shrinks down to less than 25%. So if we know organizations are more successful and more profitable, why do we not have more women in leadership? I'd like to take just a moment, if I could, and ask all of the women in the room to stand up. We're more than 10%, right? Probably half of you are great Americans, I'm not sure. we're more than 10%, and that is extreme. The number of women here today looks very different than what it did 10 years ago. And I can tell you, being in this industry and being out in the field 20 years ago, I often found myself in meetings like this being the only woman. So this is tremendous to see. It's tremendous to see so many more involved. I'm going to introduce our panelists, but do we have an extra seat up here?
Yes.
Yeah. Is Doug Albregts in the room? Where is he?
It's happening.
You want to grab a mic and join us on the stage? Well, we were having a conversation last night, and Doug was telling me about Marco establishing a women's network to raise the level of awareness of women leadership in the organization, right, and give a more solid mentorship. And so I said, well, you should be on my panel. And he said, I thought you'd never ask. I guess he didn't really mean it, so. Come on.
Yay!
I think we need to make this, we need to add some diversity to this panel.
Exactly.
So. You know what? He's kind of one of the girls.
A little bit.
All right, so with me this morning, of our panelists, I have Stephanie Keaton with AIS in Minneapolis, Minnesota. AIS is a family-owned business local, started by the Keaton family more than 25 years ago. I have Melanie Patterson with me, who is Vice President of Sales Strategies at Sharp Business Systems. I've got Natalie Cumberbatch, who is Vice President of Human Resources at Kyocera, and Patricia Ames. And I think everybody, does anybody not know Patricia? Probably not.
My colleague.
Okay, so these women all bring a different set of skills. They hold different roles for different organizations, and they're going to share their perspectives of the value that women bring to the office technology space. And so we're going to start out right off the bat with that as our first question, and we're going to ask each of the panelists to answer it. And I think we'll start with you, Stephanie. And so just share with us, from your perspective, how are female leaders positively impacting the office technology space?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel. And I just want to start out, I think a lot of us were concerned that perhaps this would come off as like a male bashing session or whatever. And I think we all agreed to the fact that we would not be where we are today in our careers if it weren't for males. I have my father that started the business, an uncle, a lot of our mentors with our manufacturers were all males. And so I respect and appreciate the fact that that was something that was extremely important in my career. But I think Jenny's right. Like, you look at the room today, and it is different than it was 10 years ago, but still, we have a lot of growth to do. And I think that, I shared a story that I remember 20 years ago, I was at a manufacturer meeting, and I looked to my dad and I said, how come every person here has a mustache and smells like crazy cologne. And that was like, and there was no other women. And so I think, you know, if I were to say anything about the importance of strong female leadership at our company, I think it just, first of all, you have to have the skills and the expertise to have the job. So I don't care what the sex is, I don't care what the race is, all of those things. But I think that females generally can multitask maybe a little differently than our counterparts. I know from my perspective, balancing a family and maybe being coaches and also running a team, it takes a lot. And I think that the empathy and the compassion and the understanding for our employees that are trying to do the same thing is perhaps a little bit better than my male counterparts. And so I think having more females will help give your dealership or your company the ability to maybe be more family friendly. And I think that that's been something that AIS has had since day one, and I've learned throughout the last 24 years of working for AIS.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for so what do we bring to the table in the sense of our industry? I think that when I thought of this question, we break glass. So I actually entered also 25, 26 years ago, and I had a female president, and I didn't even realize that was not going to be the norm, right? So I think I walked in, we had this conversation, it was super fun to say, nope, I had a different experience. Granted, over time, I lived the same world where you could be the one in there, but I think we break glass. When I say we break glass, it's that we're open for change. I think we pivot sometimes quicker. And I think that falls on areas in our own world of where we have to make decisions quickly. I think that we accept failure sometimes maybe a little bit better because maybe we have more of it at times, right? Or we're viewed that it's a failure. So, yeah, my big thing is breaking glass. Just keep trying doing new things, and I think that's what we bring to the table right now. Yeah.
Resilience, I think I heard that, right? Women are definitely more resilient. That's just my opinion though. Natalie.
So I agree with my co-panelists here. I think we bring perspective. There's something to be said for not being in the room and or being asked to be at the seat at the table, but watching what's going on. And when you are watching the show or you're watching what happens, you're able to notice things. You're able to pick up things that when you're in the moment, you may not necessarily be aware of it. So I think that we can bring all the things about us, whether it be a mother, a nurturer, having to do the multitasking, having to be the person to say no. We bring all of those things to the table that is completely different. And I think that, you know, just by showing up, I think that is really, and we saw that today, just showing up, it makes that difference to us.
Okay, so you mentioned having a seat at the table. How can we ensure that women are having more opportunities to have a seat at the table? That seems to be one of the biggest challenges.
I think it probably even goes back to what Stephanie said in terms of, you know, having the male sponsorships. If you're already there, we need you. You know, we need you to speak up for us. We need you to speak up for us when we're not in the room. We need you to advocate for us. We really need you to be our partners and empathize with what we're going through. I think that this is a great industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but if you're not open to sharing that with us, then we are not going to be able to be to our full potential. So I think it's a partnership, and we want to know that we have you, you know, you have our backs, the gentlemen, that you have our backs.
Very good. Patricia.
So I am a big believer in diversity. I just feel like teams are much stronger when they're coming from many different points of views and perspectives that can get stitched together into some really strong fabric that can be used in all kinds of creative decision making. So why wouldn't you want more women on your team is how I feel about it. I do think though that we're talking about male versus female, what a female may be good at versus what, you know, there's good female drivers, there's bad female drivers, there's, you know, there's all, everybody, there's a trajectory for everybody from, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, what race, creed, color you are, there's people that are good at things, there's people that are bad at things. So just stitching together a really good team thoughtfully so that you do have that diversity just makes you stronger. And so again, I would say, why wouldn't you want more women on your team?
You mentioned, you alluded to possible challenges that women may face in the workforce. What do you think, how do you think about that?
There's a lot of challenges. I mean, I definitely believe there's a lot of discrimination out there. Pay disparities are a big one. Those are hard to overcome. It's a complicated issue. So there's, you know, thoughts about maternity leave and taking time off, and so the value of every minute that you spend over a period of time. It is very complicated, but and it's getting a little bit better, but not much better. So I think there's definite discrimination out there.
What's interesting though, when you think about the maternity leave, now men are being awarded maternity leave, right?
Which is great, because there's usually there's two parents raising a child. So I think that's a positive development.
Doug, what do you think?
Oh, jeez. So these lovely women asked me to dinner last night, and that was a mistake. Number one, I couldn't turn them down. Number two, I joked around about being on their panel. No, I'm on their panel.
There might have been some alcohol
There was
involved.
some alcohol involved, not like last year, Mike, where we were sitting. First off, Aubrey Ackervick is here, who is Stand Up Aubrey. She's the daughter of our COO, Trevor. And so she's here just, you know, primarily because we're trying to talk her into moving from this part of the country to work for Marco in Minnetonka, Minnesota. And as you know, it's 75 below zero. Not easy for a young woman to move from here to there, but I told her that this was the most important session of the entire conference. And so at Marco, we're taking this extraordinarily seriously. And this is why I'm now on this, up here with these remarkable women, because they heard this last night. But we are putting together our own leadership council within Marco just for this reason, because of the diversity in thinking. Because you get a bunch of people in the same room that are of the same mind, of the same likeness, and guess what? You get a lot of the same solutions, a lot of the same answers, and a lot of those things just end up not pushing your business forward. And this is becoming a very diverse industry, and it should. And I think it's interesting the way you opened up about the fact that I remember coming to these events just 12 years ago, and you two were the only two women in the room. And I was like, wow, they're incredibly brave. And I shouldn't have looked at it that way. But I'm like, I can't imagine being in that room, being in their shoes, you know, listening to a bunch of, you know, men in non-diverse environment talking about certain things. And making sure that they have their opinions heard and everything else. The stats you used were amazing, because we're going to be using those stats within Marco, and we have more to add, but those are exactly right. And so I'm a big proponent of it, because I think it's great for business, it's great for the communities we serve, it's great for we have a gold standard pillar, and this has become a big part of the pillar that we have at Marco. So all joking aside, I didn't think you'd call me up here, but thanks for doing that, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Like it, right? Adding a little diversity and
There you go.
those perspectives, so we appreciate that.
We'll let you in.
We're gonna go back to the shared challenges that sometimes interfere with women who are trying to build their career. Would you like to share your perspective on that?
Sure. I think the shared challenges are, you know, trying to dispel a lot of myths about what we should traditionally be doing, and, you know, being the one to have to make certain sacrifices in families. You know, there's always this putting the family first, and the assumption is that, well, if you have two people in a household, woman's the one that's got to put her whole career on hold. And she's not going to be able to excel because she has a family, and fill in the blank. So I think that those are some of the things that women have to contend with. Whether or not you have children, it's like an assumption that's already placed on you. And then I think another one that's continuously, it's kind of, you're seeing a lot of, is feeling that there's something you have to do extra. You know, you have to be more than to prove your worth. You have to be more, you have to do more, you have to be more. And you know, a lot of that, it can be very jarring, it can be very, very heavy, and it can lead to things like imposter syndrome. So you're worrying about how good you are because you have this imaginary yardstick that you're trying to measure yourself against. So these are things that women face no matter what industry that they're in. It's definitely a challenge.
I'm gonna zero in on the inclusion part, because I do think for different reasons, right? You mentioned raising a family. Sometimes women don't have the opportunity with that responsibility to network, like the males do at times. Let's talk about what strategies we think about or would work well to encourage more inclusion for women in the workplace.
You want me to take this one? All right, I'll take this one. So I think that Natalie just touched on the baseline of what we all know we deal with, right? If we're a parent, if we're a wife, if we're not a wife, whatever the case may be, that those are just standards that come along with choosing a career. That if you're focusing in on your career, how can we bring more strategies into our workplace? I'm gonna say to you guys in the room, pay attention to the females that are in your organization. Help them to thrive, help them to give the opportunity to talk about their careers. Sometimes that we can get put in places that maybe we're a mother, we're a wife, we're running to soccer practice, that we may or may not get up at 5 in the morning and run till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Don't assume it. I was not one of those people. I wanted to have a career and I wanted to be a very strong mother at the same time. And I think not assuming how much we may or may not want to work or put into our career is a strategy of just paying attention to the people on your team. Giving the opportunity to ask, what is your career path? Where do you see yourself? Would you like to be in leadership? That is a huge thing that when different roles come up, think about everyone on your team. I don't really care if you're male or female, but I think as a female, at least I know leaders in this room that I work with or work for or have in the past can say that I would insert myself into areas of opportunity. But I'll tell you, not every female has the strength to do that. And I definitely did not have it in my 20s. Okay?
I think going off of that, just people in this room, if you're parents or grandparents, teach this next generation that you can do anything. And I have 2 girls, and I was raised where my dad had the same thought processes for me and my brothers for chores and for responsibilities and all of the things that we signed up for. We had to fully commit, and that really I could do anything that any male could do. And I think vice versa, if you've got males, females have every right that you do, and teach your sons, grandsons that girls are just as smart, can be just as good at leaders, if not better, all the things, because I think that's extremely important as we move forward in the next generation of humans, to teach them to be kind, first of all, and then second of all, to be inclusive to both sexes, and making sure that everyone's given that voice, so that when they do get to the workforce, they're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid, whether they're a male or a female, to stand up for themselves, and they're not afraid to ask the questions, to be invited to the party, so to speak.
When I was talking with Stephanie, I learned that her father was the most influential mentor for her, lifelong mentor, right? And has been in the business for the past 20 years. Having a sponsor or mentor is extremely important. And I'm gonna go back to Patricia to talk a little bit about that. We've talked about sponsors a little bit.
Yeah,
idea.
And I'm a little conflicted about it because, the most important lesson I was ever taught in my life was from my mother, and it was that life is not fair. And so just embrace it and deal with it, right? And so that's been kind of my MO as I've gone through my life journey. And people often talk about mentors and how important they are, and they list these mentors. There are people that don't have access to a mentor and have never had that ability. And so obviously it's important because people rave about it, but I don't think it's as prevalent as one would hope. So maybe my perspective on this is a conscious effort to help raise some people up, and it doesn't have to be gender-based. Just mentorship in general is more rewarding for the person doing the mentoring than it is the mentee. And there is an old saying with mentorship that you don't choose who you're going to mentor, they actually choose you. But kind of opening your mind and your heart to that, and making a conscious effort to engage that way is really going to change some people's lives. So I think it's incredibly valuable, and sometimes I'm a little jealous when I hear about some of the mentors that people are so proud of. So I think it's a really critical thing.
By raise of hands, how many people in the audience had a mentor that was very influential in their career?
Unbelievable.
Pretty much everybody. How many of you are mentoring somebody right now? Male or female, right? Very good. How many have formal mentorship programs in your organizations? Fewer hands, but there's quite a few out there. That's good. Good. So Doug talked a little bit of, what did you call it? The Women Council? I call it.
And Marco?
Ed Marco, yeah.
Well, we're gonna let you guys name it.
Okay, all right.
Awesome.
Okay. Are we gonna do that tonight?
Yeah, well, yeah, if you can hold me up on another panel. But we're gonna do a retreat, and you were talking about best practices,
Yeah.
and what, we're gonna send, our women leaders on a retreat. We're gonna combine it with some wellness practices and things like that, but we're gonna give them 3 major issues within Marco that are plaguing Marco that we haven't solved very well. And we're gonna tell that group that they're gonna solve those issues. And one of them,
Nice, very good.
and the first one is this issue, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to do that the proper way for the company that we are. That's the first one. But the second one is around customer touch and customer service, and how can we be this is what our business is built off of, and what can we do differently? Because again, the people in the room that have been making those decisions have been the same people for years, and there hasn't been a lot of change in that, and we need to change that. And there's a couple of other topics we're going to do. So that's what we're going to do with the Marco, and I was using this to listen and to be a part of, and to have Aubrey look at it, and I texted this back to a group of women on our organization that are on this council, I guess we're going to call it. What you guys will tell me we'll call it. And I texted it back to them, and I said we're going to take notes. We're going to get back, and hopefully get some really cool ideas. So again, it's been helpful.
Very good.